They say destiny weaves the strangest tapestries, and sometimes the most unexpected strands cross at just the right moment. Imagine a remote village school, barely standing on its last legs until a mysterious millionaire sweeps in with a noble offer to revive it. Now picture a humble roadside cafe where a hard-working waitress unknowingly carries a past that has been shaped by heartbreak and betrayal. In this tale of shocking revelations and soul-stirring drama, these two worlds collide, triggering a chain of events no one could have predicted. Welcome to a story so breathtaking it will keep you on the edge of your seat. Alfred Wayne Winston had grown accustomed to the world of polished marble floors, fancy car collections, and business-class flights. At 60 years old, with salt and pepper hair and a lean, tall frame, he presented an image of a self-made man who had confronted life head-on and emerged victorious. Raised in a working-class district of Philadelphia, Alfred had tasted poverty early on, sharing a cramped home with 4 siblings. Yet through sheer determination, he rose from selling newspapers on street corners to building Winston Investments, a multi-million-dollar enterprise recognized across the eastern seaboard. Despite his success, Alfred felt an unfillable void gnawing at his conscience. His greatest regrets lay in his personal life. Years ago, in his early 20s, he had been in a relationship with a woman named Caroline. She was a bright-eyed college student who dreamed of writing a novel that would shake the planet, as she once boasted. For him, she was the spark that ignited the best version of himself. And for a fleeting time, they believed destiny had brought them together. Then a misunderstanding over an accidental pregnancy separated them. They never married, never raised the child together. In fact, Alfred was told that the child had been miscarried. The heartbreak of losing both Caroline and the future they might have shared lingered with him forever. In the decades that followed, Alfred built his empire. He traveled the globe, met celebrities, partnered with Fortune 500 leaders, including brief philanthropic discussions with names like Bill Gates and his foundation team, and enjoyed private dinners with tech pioneers. Yet, beneath the glimmering surface, he remained haunted by the memory of Caroline and the unborn child who never saw the light of day. As Alfred's 60th birthday approached, he felt compelled to embark on a philanthropic mission that would echo his own childhood dreams, supporting small, underfunded schools. He recalled the public school teacher who had once recognized his academic potential. Without that teacher's intervention, he might never have discovered the path that ultimately led him to success. So when an old friend, Philip Maguire, who worked for a rural development NGO, mentioned that a remote village school was on the verge of being shut down, Alfred saw his chance to make amends with his own past by adopting the school as a personal project. That school was Redwood Creek Elementary, located in the scenic outskirts of Pinewood County. It had leaky roofs, crumbling walls, and a dwindling number of children who could barely afford textbooks. Alfred's heart clenched when he saw photos of the neglected classrooms. He decided then and there to dedicate a substantial part of his wealth to turning Redwood Creek Elementary into a beacon of hope. The move garnered media attention, but to Alfred, it was about more than publicity, it was about redemption. Driving along the winding roads that cut through lush forests and rolling hills, Alfred was struck by the quiet, unassuming beauty of Pinewood County. He hadn't done anything so impulsive in years. Sitting in the back seat of a black SUV, he watched the farmland pass by in a blur. Every few miles, they would encounter battered signs reading homemade honey or fresh pumpkins, reminding him that real life existed away from corporate boardrooms and Manhattan skyscrapers. "Sir, we're about 5 miles from Redwood Creek Elementary," said Harris, Alfred's longtime driver and bodyguard. The edges of Alfred's mouth turned up in a rare smile. He felt a nervous energy flicker within him, like he hadn't experienced in decades something akin to hope. The villagers, having been informed of his arrival by the local newspaper, were lined up at the school gate. Their eager faces exhibited awe, curiosity, and relief as Alfred's SUV rolled in. Children wearing mismatched uniforms giggled and waved, while teachers, wide-eyed, tried their best to maintain order. Mary Louise, the school's principal, stepped forward. She was in her late 50s, her once dark hair now streaked with silver. She wore a gentle smile that seemed forged by years of dedication to children who came from tough backgrounds. Her small frame belied her powerful spirit. She was known locally for dipping into her own modest savings to buy stationery for needy students. She extended her hand to Alfred. "Welcome to Redwood Creek Elementary, Mr. Winston," she said, her soft voice trembling slightly with emotion. Alfred shook her hand and introduced himself simply, "Please, call me Alfred, and thank you for having me. I'm here to help." He looked around at the decaying walls and cracked pavement in the courtyard. He could see the glimmer of possibility in the children's eyes. He also saw the weight of dire financial struggles in the faculty's tired smiles. Something inside him, maybe paternal, maybe reminiscent of his own humble roots, rose with compassion. Alfred's first tour of Redwood Creek Elementary unveiled the stark reality that photos couldn't fully capture. The library was scarcely stocked. A few outdated encyclopedias lined the shelves, and tattered paperbacks were held together by adhesive tape. One of the classrooms still used a chalkboard so riddled with cracks that chalk dust would slip into the recesses of the broken surface, making writing nearly impossible. Worse, the art supplies, paints, crayons, even paper had to be rationed, limiting the children's ability to explore their creativity. "I can't believe you've stayed afloat this long," Alfred said quietly to Mary Louise as they toured. His voice contained a tremor of respect. She shrugged. "We survive on grit and goodwill." But we were weeks away from shutting our doors for good. In the hallway, a young boy carrying a stack of books nearly tripped over a loose floorboard. Without hesitation, Alfred bent down to steady the boy. The child blinked up at him, wide-eyed. "Thank you, mister," the boy whispered, scurrying away. That brief encounter crystallized Alfred's resolve. He would not only repair the floors or fix the roof, he would pour in enough funds to ensure Redwood Creek Elementary thrived for generations. Silently, he remembered the promise he had made to himself decades ago. If he ever became rich, he would build something that would outlast him, something that could truly impact lives. After spending the morning inspecting the classrooms and talking with the teachers, Alfred decided to step into the nearby diner, the Bluebird Cafe, for lunch. It was a small, cozy place, adorned with faded photographs of local farmland and the owner's ancestors. The scent of freshly baked bread and sizzling bacon drifted through the air. Country music played softly from an old jukebox in the corner. The waitress approached his table with a warm smile. She looked around 19 or 20, though her eyes conveyed wisdom far beyond her years. She had dark, curly hair pinned back under a yellow bandana, bright hazel eyes, and a posture that hinted at a life of perpetual struggle. Her name tag read, "Evelyn. What can I get you?" she asked politely. Alfred glanced at the menu, but before he could respond, he noticed the battered textbooks piled on a nearby table. They appeared to be related to business management and early childhood education. "Studying while working?" he asked. A flicker of embarrassment crossed Evelyn's face. "Yes, sir. I'm trying to get my JED and maybe go to college someday. It's a slow process," she smiled shyly. Alfred offered a small nod. Something about her manner, the way she scanned the room, her quickness to notice other people's needs, reminded him of someone from his past. The lines between memory and reality blurred for a second, and he nearly dismissed it as a coincidence. "Well, I admire your dedication," he said gently. She took his order, a club sandwich and a coffee, black, no sugar. Alfred continued observing her as she navigated tables brimming with customers. Her interactions were full of authenticity and empathy. He couldn't help but wonder why someone so bright was stuck in a dead-end job. He also found it curious that he felt drawn to her. It wasn't romantic, nor paternal exactly, but a gentle tug at his heartstrings suggested he should pay attention to this waitress who seemed oddly familiar. After lunch, Alfred returned to the school for an impromptu assembly. Students and teachers gathered in the dilapidated gymnasium, each face reflecting a mix of hope and skepticism. Standing at the center, near an old wooden podium, Alfred cleared his throat. "In my youth," he began, his voice resonant, "I went to a school that wasn't too different from Redwood Creek Elementary. It took one teacher's belief in my potential to change my future. It's time for me to pay that kindness forward. So, starting today, I'm adopting Redwood Creek Elementary. The renovations will begin immediately, new classrooms, technology labs, and a fully stocked library." A wave of excited chatter swept through the crowd. The children clapped and squealed, some cheering while others stood in amazed silence. Mary Louise covered her mouth with trembling hands, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm also creating a scholarship program," Alfred continued, "so that any bright student from Redwood Creek who wants to pursue higher education won't be stopped by financial obstacles." His words echoed through the gym like a promise from on high. In a matter of minutes, Redwood Creek Elementary went from being on the brink of closure to standing at the cusp of a miracle. The applause erupted in a thunderous roar, the entire community brimming with gratitude and awe. Yet Alfred noticed Evelyn slipping in through a side door. She leaned quietly against the wall, listening intently. He didn't know what brought her here. Perhaps her younger siblings attended the school, or she was simply curious. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and Alfred caught a fleeting expression across her face, one that looked equal parts admiration and sorrow. Over the next few days, the renovation plans accelerated. Trucks arrived carrying new building materials, and a team of architects busily measured the school premises. Alfred split his time between coordinating with Mary Louise and personally overseeing the budget for each phase of the project. He wanted no expense spared. In the evenings, while the construction site quieted, Alfred found himself returning to the Bluebird Cafe. Each visit, he ordered the same club sandwich and black coffee, not because he lacked imagination, but because he appreciated the sense of routine, something he'd rarely experienced in his high-octane urban life. His interactions with Evelyn became a bright spot in his day. They chatted casually about the new developments at the school and sometimes about her dream to become a teacher. She revealed that her mother had died when she was very young, leaving her to bounce between distant relatives who rarely showed affection. No father was mentioned in her stories, and Alfred, cautious about prying, didn't push her for more details. At night, alone in his rustic rented cabin near the town, Alfred's mind buzzed with conflicting emotions. A haunting sense of déjà vu would often strike him when he talked to Evelyn, something in her mannerisms, her choice of words, or her tilt of the head felt eerily reminiscent of Caroline, his long-lost love. Then, one quiet evening, a photograph surfaced as he rummaged through his travel bag. It was a small, faded snapshot from decades ago, showing Caroline smiling in front of a sprawling oak tree, her curly dark hair tied in a loose ponytail, her hazel eyes sparkling with life. Alfred felt a pang of grief as he ran a finger over the photograph. Could it be his imagination, or did Evelyn truly share that same sparkle in her eyes? Driven by a mix of longing and curiosity, Alfred decided to ask around town about Evelyn's family history, discreetly, of course. The local librarian, an elderly man named Harold Jenkins, had lived in Pinewood County his whole life. If anyone knew stories that spanned generations, it was Harold. When Alfred casually mentioned Evelyn's name, Harold hesitated. "You mean Evelyn Parker?" he said, scratching his chin. Poor girl's had it tough. Mother died young. Think her mother's name was Caroline. Caroline Parker. She moved here from Philadelphia a long time ago. If memory serves, she ended up pregnant in her 20s, but the father never stuck around. She passed away shortly after Evelyn was born. Kidney failure, I believe. Real tragedy. Alfred's heart pounded in his chest. Caroline Parker. The age fit, the curly hair, the name Caroline. Philadelphia. Could it be the same Caroline, his Caroline, whom he believed had miscarried decades ago? He managed to control his expression, but internally, a tide of shock and anguish threatened to engulf him. The father had never stuck around. Had Caroline believed Alfred had abandoned her, or had someone else told that story? The puzzle pieces spiraled in Alfred's mind, forming a half-finished picture that terrified him. If that was indeed the same Caroline Parker, then Evelyn was. No, it couldn't be. He had been told Caroline miscarried, yet Harold's story suggested otherwise. That night, Alfred barely slept. He paced around his cabin, the flicker of the fireplace throwing dancing shadows on the walls as he pored over all he knew. Caroline had left Philadelphia over 30 years ago. He and Caroline had been together around that same time. He recalled the ugly fight they had after discovering she was pregnant. They had both been so young, so unprepared. Then came a letter from Caroline's friend stating that Caroline had lost the baby and moved away for a fresh start. Devastated, Alfred drowned himself in work, determined to forget the painful memory. But what if the letter was a lie? What if Caroline hadn't miscarried and the baby survived? That would mean Evelyn was his child, and she had spent her entire life believing her father was absent, maybe even a deadbeat. Alfred's stomach twisted. He felt a tornado of regret swirl through him. He wondered how to find out the truth. A DNA test seemed like the logical step, but how would he convince Evelyn to take one without alarming her? More importantly, how would he navigate the emotional fallout of telling a young woman who had grown up fending for herself that he might be her father? He realized with a jolt that if this story were true, Evelyn had grown up in abject poverty, likely suffering hardships he'd never even imagined. And he, with his massive fortune, had been oblivious the whole time. He had inadvertently repeated the cycle of paternal absence that had defined his own boyhood years, though, in his mind, it had been forced upon him by misinformation. The next day, at the Bluebird Cafe, Alfred studied Evelyn more carefully. He noticed the shape of her jawline, so similar to Caroline's, and the melodic cadence in her voice. The cafe was unusually busy, so he couldn't find a private moment to talk. When she finally brought him the check, she paused, looking at him with concern. "You okay?" she asked. He forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just a bit tired from all the school renovations." She gave him a small, empathetic nod. For a split second, her gaze held that soulful warmth that had once enchanted him about Caroline. Alfred's heart ached. Perhaps fate had brought him here first, to adopt Redwood Creek Elementary, and then to discover the child he never knew existed. Unable to restrain his need for clarity any longer, Alfred confided in Philip McGuire, his old friend from the NGO, who had first told him about Redwood Creek Elementary. They met at the local bed and breakfast, away from prying ears. "I need your help, Philip," Alfred said, recounting the entire story of Caroline from decades ago, their abrupt breakup, and the letter claiming a miscarriage. Then he shared Harold's account of Caroline Parker in Pinewood County and of her daughter, Evelyn. Philip's eyes widened. "My God, that's quite a coincidence. Or maybe not a coincidence at all. Fate, perhaps?" Alfred lowered his gaze. "I need to confirm, but I don't want to confront Evelyn directly without proof. It could devastate her if she thinks I'm some nutcase. Yet I can't just leave it alone. If she's truly my daughter..." He couldn't complete the sentence. The enormity of the situation weighed on every syllable. Philip suggested a discreet approach. Look, I have some contacts in the local clinic. Maybe we can arrange for a simple paternity test, one that doesn't require her immediate knowledge. He paused. That might be invasive, but if it's your only way to confirm the truth without dragging her through emotional turmoil prematurely. Alfred nodded solemnly. It's questionable ethically, but I have to know. Once I confirm, I'll tell her everything. With that plan in motion, Alfred arranged for a quick swab of Evelyn's used utensils at the cafe, a morally grey method, but for him it felt like the lesser evil compared to turning her life upside down on a mere hunch. He used his connections to rush the DNA analysis. The following week felt like an eternity. While the construction crews tore down old walls and installed state-of-the-art infrastructure at Redwood Creek, Alfred navigated an emotional battlefield within himself. He quietly combed through Caroline's old letters, trying to piece together the timeline of her departure. He also found an old journal entry from years ago where Caroline wrote, "I wish Alfred knew how scared I am. I want him to be part of this, but everything's so uncertain." Reading those lines, Alfred experienced a mixture of grief and anger. Why hadn't Caroline called him directly? Who orchestrated that lie about the miscarriage? Possibly a well-intended friend or relative who thought it best if they parted ways. The frustration gnawed at him, but so did the realization that focusing on the past couldn't undo the present. On a Thursday afternoon, Philip slipped him an envelope. Inside was the result from the clandestine test. Just one glance at the words, probability of paternity, 99. 99% turned Alfred's world upside down. He had a daughter. He had lived for decades believing he had lost his chance at fatherhood, only to discover that child had grown up alone, believing she had no father. Overcome with emotion, Alfred returned to his cabin and wept. For the first time in many years, tears cascaded down his face, unleashing a storm of regret, shock, relief, and longing. With the news confirmed, Alfred's next step loomed large. How to tell Evelyn? How could he explain that he hadn't abandoned her, but had been lied to? And how might she respond to a father figure suddenly waltzing into her life with millions of dollars to spare? He contemplated simply sitting down with Evelyn and showing her the results. But he feared that might traumatize her. Another approach was to talk to Mary Louise or someone she trusted, but that also felt like an invasion of her privacy. In the end, he decided that telling Evelyn privately, face to face, was the only honorable path. Yet fate seemed to have its own plan. One evening, as he visited the Bluebird Cafe to gather his thoughts over a cup of coffee, he noticed Evelyn wasn't her usual vibrant self. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and every now and then she dabbed her cheeks with a napkin as if wiping away tears before continuing her shift. Concerned, Alfred cornered her during a lull in the rush hour. "Evelyn, what's wrong?" he asked gently. She put on a brave face. "It's nothing. I'm fine." He studied her trembling hands. "You're clearly upset. If there's anything I can do," she hesitated before sighing. "My landlord is raising the rent. I already can barely afford groceries. I don't know what to do. I might have to move again." Her voice quivered. Alfred's heart ached. Here was his daughter, though she didn't know it, trapped in a life of perpetual instability and financial strain. He longed to protect her, to whisk her away to a safer world. "Listen," he began, "I can help. Let me pay your rent until you get on your feet. Or I can set you up in a small apartment that my company is renting for employees." But Evelyn's face hardened. "I can't accept that. You're a nice man, Mr. Winston, but we barely know each other. I don't want charity." Alfred swallowed. He realized that Evelyn's pride mirrored his own younger self, who had refused help even when desperately needed. This conversation was spiraling in a direction he hadn't planned. Summoning courage, he made a bold decision. "Evelyn," he said softly, "there's something I have to tell you. Let's go somewhere quiet." She eyed him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Reluctantly, she agreed. They ended up in the diner's back office, a cramped space with scuffed linoleum floors and stacks of receipts. Alfred closed the door behind them. He took a deep breath. "I'm about to say something that will sound impossible, but please hear me out." He explained how, decades ago, he had been in love with a young woman named Caroline, who was from Philadelphia, and how they had a bitter fight after discovering she was pregnant. He recounted the letter that claimed there was a miscarriage, and his shock upon learning that Caroline had moved to Pinewood County. Then, with trembling hands, he passed her the paternity test results. Evelyn stared at the papers, her lips parted in confusion. Then disbelief. Then a dawning horror. She shook her head. You're saying that you're my father." Her voice cracked, tears pooling at the corners of her eyes. Alfred's own eyes brimmed with tears. "Yes," he said, voice quivering. "I never knew you were alive. If I had, I would have done everything possible to be there for you." She pushed the paper away as if it burned her fingers. "This can't be real. No, I don't understand." She took a step back, colliding with a file cabinet. "All my life I thought my father left my mother. She died, and I was alone." Alfred reached out a hand gently, not daring to touch her, but wanting to offer comfort. "I'm so sorry. I would never have abandoned you knowingly, I swear on everything I hold dear." Her breath came in ragged gasps. For a moment, he thought she might bolt out of the room. Instead, she buried her face in her hands, a torrent of sobs shaking her small frame. Alfred stood there, paralyzed between the urge to embrace her and the fear that his touch might worsen the avalanche of emotions. Eventually, she looked up, tears staining her cheeks. I have to go," she whispered, grabbing her purse and rushing out the back door. Alfred slumped against the wall, feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his life. Days passed with no word from Evelyn. Alfred tried going to the cafe, but her co-workers said she had taken a leave of absence. She wasn't at her rundown apartment either. The only clues Alfred had came from a neighbor who saw her pack a bag and leave on the local bus. He sank into despair. The philanthropic project at Redwood Creek Elementary continued on schedule, but Alfred's heart wasn't in it. He had finally found his daughter, only to push her away with the enormity of the truth. A swirl of rumors circulated among the townspeople. Some said Evelyn took a job in the next county. Others claimed she was staying with a friend who lived on the outskirts of Pinewood County. 3 weeks passed. The school's library was renovated, the new computer lab was up and running. The local press hailed Alfred as a saint who had saved the children's future. But inside, Alfred felt hollow. He had lost the most precious opportunity he could ever have had, knowing his own child. One afternoon, as he supervised the final painting of the school walls, Mary Louise approached him, her demeanor grave. "There's a call for you in my office," she said quietly. Alfred walked to Mary Louise's cluttered desk and picked up the phone. "Hello?" He recognized the voice instantly. Evelyn, shaky but determined. "Mr. Winston?" Alfred," she began, stumbling over his name. I need to talk to you." Alfred's heart practically soared into his throat. "Of course, Evelyn. Anything. Just tell me where you are, and I'll come right away." She hesitated. "I'm in Riverbend County Hospital." His grip on the phone tightened. "Hospital? What happened? Are you hurt?" "No, not exactly. I collapsed at the bus station a week ago. They found an infection in my lungs, pneumonia. It's bad, but I'm stable." She paused, and he could practically hear her swallow her pride. Please come." Alfred felt tears prick at his eyes. "I'm on my way." Alfred drove like a man possessed, the tires of his black SUV screeching as they tore along the winding country roads. The late afternoon sun cast long, anxious shadows across the landscape, but he barely noticed the beauty outside his window. His mind was locked onto one thing, and one thing only, reaching Evelyn, his daughter. his flesh and blood, lying sick and alone in a hospital room. Harris, his longtime driver, gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, pushing the limits of speed while still trying to maintain safety. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, sir," Harris assured him, but Alfred barely registered the words. Each second that passed felt like a cruel eternity. When they finally screeched into the parking lot of Riverbend County Hospital, Alfred leaped from the vehicle before it fully stopped. He rushed through the sliding glass doors, his heart hammering in his chest. At the front desk, a tired-looking nurse raised an eyebrow at his disheveled appearance and desperate tone when he demanded, "Evelyn Parker, where is she?" The nurse softened when she saw the raw fear etched into his face. "Fourth floor, room 407, she said, pointing down the hallway. "Take the elevators to your left." Alfred didn't wait for further directions. He sprinted down the hall, nearly colliding with an orderly carrying a tray of medical supplies. When he finally reached the fourth floor, he barely paused to catch his breath before spotting the correct room. He hesitated for a split second at the door, steeling himself, then pushed it open. There, lying pale and fragile under stark white hospital sheets, was Evelyn, and the fourth tube was threaded into her slender arm and a thin oxygen tube nestled beneath her nose. Her normally lively hazel eyes were dull and half-lidded with exhaustion, her skin almost translucent against the harsh fluorescent lights. Yet despite it all, when she noticed him standing there, she managed the faintest, most vulnerable smile. The sight shattered him. Alfred crossed the room in 3 long strides and sank into the chair beside her bed. His large, calloused hand, more used to boardroom handshakes than tenderness, hovered hesitantly before gently taking her smaller one. Her fingers were cold and limp, but she squeezed them weakly in return. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner," Alfred whispered, his voice cracking. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, but didn't fall. "One, I didn't know who to call. I almost didn't call you at all." Her voice was raspy, strained from the pneumonia that racked her small frame. "You called," Alfred said fiercely, squeezing her hand with a tenderness he never knew he possessed. "That's all that matters." A nurse came in quietly, checking Evelyn's vitals. She gave Alfred a cautious glance, and he quickly reassured her. "I'm her father." The nurse nodded and spoke softly. "Her vitals are stabilizing, but it's going to be a slow recovery. Good nutrition, rest, and minimal stress will be crucial. I'll make sure of it," Alfred promised without hesitation. As the nurse left, the room fell into a soft, heavy silence. Alfred sat there, listening to the beeping monitors, feeling the rise and fall of Evelyn's breathing through the hand he still held. "I hated you," Evelyn said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Alfred stiffened, but didn't pull away. She continued, "I hated you for not being there. I hated the idea of you. But now I don't know what to feel." Her words cut deep, but Alfred welcomed the pain. He deserved it. "I don't blame you," he said hoarsely. "I blamed myself every day I thought about the child I lost. If I'd known, if there had been even the slightest clue." He broke off, unable to continue. His throat was too tight with grief. Evelyn turned her head slightly to look at him more directly. "I don't know if I can just accept this overnight. It's too big. Too much. I don't expect you to," Alfred said immediately. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, true vulnerability flickered across her face. She squeezed his hand again, this time a little stronger. "I don't want to be alone anymore," she whispered. "You won't be," Alfred vowed, leaning forward so she could hear every syllable. "Not ever again." That night, Alfred stayed by Evelyn's side. He refused to leave, even when the nurses suggested he go home and rest. He pulled a chair close to her bed, watching over her as she slept fitfully. Occasionally she murmured in her fever dreams, and he would gently murmur reassurances, smoothing back her hair. For hours, Alfred remained there, A silent sentinel, a father finally given the chance to protect the daughter he had lost once and who he would never lose again. In that sterile, too bright hospital room, Alfred made a silent vow. No matter what storms the future held, no matter what damage needed to be repaired, he and Evelyn would face it together. They would build the bridge between them, one tender, painful, precious moment at a time. The days that followed Evelyn's hospitalization unfolded slowly, like the first cautious steps on a fragile bridge stretching across a lifetime of sorrow. Alfred made it a point to visit the hospital every single day, arriving each morning with a fresh bouquet of flowers or a box of warm pastries he thought she might like, though Evelyn often smiled and shook her head at his attempts to spoil her. She remained weak at first, her voice raspy and her energy limited. Alfred didn't push conversations. Sometimes they would sit for hours, saying little, simply existing together in the same space, father and daughter, strangers who shared the same blood but not yet the same history. And yet, with each small exchange, each hesitant smile, each quiet laugh over hospital food mishaps, the gap between them narrowed ever so slightly. In the evenings, Alfred would read aloud from books he brought from the local library, stories about distant lands, classic novels, even the occasional cheesy romance. Evelyn listened, sometimes drifting in and out of sleep, but always clutching the corner of her blanket tightly, as if afraid that if she let go, she would wake up and find him gone. One evening, as twilight bled into the sterile hospital room, Evelyn finally broached the subject that had hung between them since the day he revealed the truth. "Why didn't you ever come find me?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Alfred put the book aside carefully. His chest ached at the question he had been dreading, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. "I didn't know you existed," he said honestly, the pain in his voice evident. I was told your mother lost the baby. I mourned you for years. I buried myself in work because facing that loss was too much." Evelyn looked down at her hands, twisting the hospital sheet between her fingers. "It's just hard to imagine all those birthdays. Graduations I never had. Nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't good enough for someone to stay." Her voice cracked, and Alfred's heart broke all over again. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "More than I can ever say. If I could go back, if I could undo it, I would give anything. But I can't. All I can do is be here now and for every day after." Silence hung heavy between them, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was thick with unspoken promises, tentative hope, and the first fragile threads of trust. Evelyn wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. "I'm not saying it's easy. I'm still angry, confused, but I don't want to hate you. I don't want to keep carrying that weight." Alfred leaned forward, his voice low and rough with emotion. "You don't have to forgive me right away, or ever if you choose not to. But if there's even a small chance we can build something, I'll take it, brick by brick, day by day." Evelyn gave a tiny, tired smile. "One brick at a time, huh?" "One brick at a time," Alfred echoed, and for the first time, a real, genuine smile lit her weary face. By the end of her second week in the hospital, Evelyn had improved enough for her doctors to consider discharging her. But she wasn't ready to return to her cramped, mold-infested apartment, nor was Alfred willing to allow her to go back to such a place. Without hesitation, Alfred arranged for a fully furnished suite in one of the town's better neighborhoods, nothing too flashy, but clean, bright, and safe. Evelyn resisted at first, her pride kicking in as it always had during years of surviving on her own. "I'm not some charity case," she protested when he first suggested it, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I know you're not," Alfred said gently. "This isn't charity, it's family. It's what a father should do." Those words, "what a father should do," echoed in Evelyn's heart long after she moved into the new apartment. The first few days were awkward. She wasn't used to the idea of having someone looking out for her, someone she could call if the refrigerator broke or if she just needed company. Alfred respected her space, but he also made it known that he was only a phone call away. True to his promise, he didn't smother her. Instead, he showed up with groceries, helped assemble a bookshelf for her JED textbooks, or simply sat quietly at her kitchen table while she studied. They began to weave a fragile kind of rhythm together, a tentative trust, slowly knitting itself between them. Some evenings, after study sessions, Evelyn would ask Alfred about Caroline. Those were bittersweet conversations. Alfred would share stories of her mother's laughter, her stubbornness, her dreams of becoming a great writer. Evelyn soaked up every detail like a sponge, trying to piece together the portrait of a woman she had barely known. One night, sitting on the balcony overlooking the quiet town, Evelyn asked a question that took Alfred by surprise. "Do you think she would have wanted us to find each other?" Alfred turned his face to the stars, blinking back unexpected tears. No, I know. She would have wanted you to have someone who loved you as much as I love you now." The words hung between them, shimmering and fragile, but real. Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder, a small gesture, but monumental in its meaning. In that moment, Alfred knew they weren't just patching up the past. They were building something new, something real, something that would stand the test of time, one brick at a time, together. Neither father nor daughter could move forward without understanding the deception that had shaped their lives. Through Philip's contacts, Alfred tracked down Karen Finch, the old friend who had written the letter proclaiming Caroline's miscarriage. After weeks of searching, they found her living in a modest house in upstate New York. Alfred drove out there with Evelyn, determined to hear Karen's explanation firsthand. They arrived at a small home with peeling paint, greeted by a worn-faced woman in her 60s. Karen's eyes widened when she saw them. She insisted they come inside. Over cups of lukewarm tea, Karen admitted the truth. Caroline had been terrified about telling Alfred she was pregnant. They were both so young, uncertain if they were ready for parenthood. After the fight, Caroline planned to get an abortion but changed her mind last minute. Afraid Alfred would resent her and feeling pressured by family, Caroline confided in Karen. Karen, in turn, thought the child would only complicate matters. She believed it would be better if Alfred believed there was no child to tie him down. So, at Caroline's request, who was in a confused, emotionally fragile state at the time they concocted the story about the miscarriage and hid the truth. She regretted it soon after, Karen said, her voice shaky with guilt. But by then, she was too embarrassed and afraid to reach out again. She didn't want you to think she was a liar and come to resent her or the baby, so she moved away, told everyone that the father abandoned them. After Caroline died, it was too late to fix any of it. Alfred sat in stunned silence, fury and sorrow raging inside him. Evelyn stared at the floor, tears dripping onto the cracked linoleum. "So my mother actually wanted to reach out to him?" she asked, voice trembling. "He never abandoned her?" Karen's voice quavered. "No, she was just scared of being judged. She was worried Alfred would feel trapped, and she didn't want that. It was a mess of misguided intentions and fear." At that, Evelyn let out a strangled sob, and Alfred wrapped his arms around her. The weight of decades of pain pressed down on them, but for the first time, they had the truth. The real tragedy was that a single lie, born of confusion and fear, had severed the bond between father and daughter for nearly 2 decades. Returning to Pinewood County, both Alfred and Evelyn felt a heavy burden lift, despite the immense sorrow it brought. They understood the chain of events that had led to their separation, and though it was too late to bring Caroline back, father and daughter could salvage the time they had left. Evelyn started therapy sessions to process the emotional turmoil, with Alfred footing the bill. She also resumed her GED studies, determined to take advantage of the scholarship program Alfred had established not out of nepotism, but to embody the very purpose of his philanthropic efforts. Though it was surreal, Evelyn found herself on the receiving end of her father's generosity in both finance and emotional support. However, fate had one more twist. As Redwood Creek Elementary prepared for its official reopening ceremony, complete with local politicians, journalists, and townspeople, news broke that Winston Investments, Alfred's company, was under investigation for fraudulent overseas transactions. A rogue department head, in pursuit of personal gain, had engaged in money laundering. Because Alfred's name was on all official company documents, the scandal threatened to tarnish his legacy and freeze his assets. Suddenly, the philanthropic hero who saved Redwood Creek Elementary became the target of scandalous headlines: philanthropist or fraudster. The town's newspapers, which had praised him just days before, speculated about whether his donation to the school was merely a smokescreen. Alfred felt the sting of betrayal from a corporate world he had once mastered. His name was dragged through the mud. Investors began to panic and withdraw from Winston Investments, triggering a domino effect that threatened to topple the entire company. With the ribbon-cutting ceremony days away, Alfred received letters from the bank, indicating that most of his personal fortune was frozen pending investigation. He stared at the official notices, realizing that the money he intended to pour into Redwood Creek Elementary might be in jeopardy if the inquiry dragged on. Word of Alfred's predicament swept through the village like wildfire. Many residents, especially those benefiting from the newly renovated school, were stunned by the allegations. They had witnessed Alfred's integrity and heartfelt devotion firsthand. But the swirling media reports made it difficult for some to trust him completely. A few even suggested that Redwood Creek Elementary might not be finished, or that the building supplies might disappear if the funding dried up. Evelyn, having experienced a lifetime of financial struggle, recognized the precariousness of the situation. It was ironic, just when she found her father, he stood on the verge of losing everything he had built. Rather than succumb to despair, she felt a surge of determination to stand by him. In a surprising twist, Mary Louise, along with the teachers, parents, and villagers, started a fundraiser of their own to ensure the school project could be completed if Alfred's funds were tied up indefinitely. The local diner held a bake sale. The farmers donated produce for charity auctions, and parents contributed whatever they could. Even children donated small amounts from their piggy banks. The story caught the attention of a Philadelphia-based reporter who had initially come to cover the scandal. Seeing the solidarity of the village, the reporter wrote a balanced article, "Small Town Stands" by billionaire benefactor. The piece contrasted the sensational headlines and painted Alfred as a victim of corporate betrayal rather than the villain. Public sentiment began to shift, albeit slowly. Meanwhile, Alfred spent his days embroiled in legal battles, meeting with lawyers and forensic accountants to clear his name. Evelyn stayed by his side, learning about the complexities of business law while simultaneously getting a crash course in the father-daughter relationship she never had. They found solace in each other's presence, forging a bond that transcended wealth or status. Weeks turned into months, and the legal investigation continued. Bit by bit, it became clear that Alfred was indeed innocent, and the true culprits were a handful of corrupt employees who had exploited loopholes for personal gain. Public opinion pivoted in his favor, and gradually the freeze on his assets was lifted. By then, Redwood Creek Elementary was near completion thanks to both Alfred's initial funding and the town's own resourcefulness. On a crisp autumn morning, the entire community gathered for the school's grand reopening. The newly built library sparkled with modern shelving, the sports field was reseeded, and the computer lab boasted brand new desktops, courtesy of a local tech sponsor. Children raced through the halls, marveling at the transformation. In a powerful moment of unity, Mary Louise invited Evelyn to cut the ribbon alongside Alfred. cameras flashed, capturing the father and daughter wearing matching broad smiles, both full of pride and a tinge of disbelief at how far they had come. Standing before the crowd, Alfred's voice trembled as he spoke. "My dream was to give back, to change lives as my teacher once changed mine. But in the process, I discovered my own daughter. It's a reminder that life is unpredictable and that hope can emerge from the darkest corners." Evelyn took the microphone next. Though shy by nature, she found unexpected courage. "The truth is, I used to think wealth was the key to happiness. But I've learned, by seeing how this community came together, that real wealth lies in unity, compassion, and honesty." She paused, glancing at Alfred with tearful gratitude. "I thank all of you for standing by my father, for standing by me, and for welcoming us both into your hearts." The applause thundered, and for a moment, father and daughter locked eyes, each silently acknowledging the painful journey that brought them to this pivotal moment. Through heartbreak, betrayal, and near ruin, they found something stronger than money or fame: love and genuine connection. As the newly renovated Redwood Creek Elementary buzzes with laughter and learning, the story of Alfred Winston and Evelyn Parker stands as a testament to how life's darkest corners can hold the brightest surprises. A lifetime of secrets, a single fateful encounter in a modest cafe, and the unwavering power of community support all converged to rewrite the destiny of a father and daughter once torn apart by a lie. Their journey wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about redemption, forgiveness, and the discovery that genuine love transcends time, mistakes, and even scandal. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with friends who need a dose of hope, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales. Thank you for joining us on this emotional ride. May it inspire you to believe that no matter how deep the hurt, love can still rise to the surface.